So there's no two ways about it. The iPhone 7 has been selling like hotcakes, and it doesn't come as much of a surprise then that there's a whole horde of companies who are trying to board the wagon. So with that being said, welcome to my full review of the $75 iPhone 7. Let's get started. So when I took this guy out the box, I was pleasantly surprised. It looks and feels just like the original iPhone 7, and unless you have them side by side, it's difficult to tell the difference. And to be honest, it's still difficult even when you do. The clone feels really solid in the hands, both structurally and in terms of resistance to scratches. And in terms of the packaging, they've managed to create an iPhone 7 box that just isn't quite an iPhone 7 box, but it looks quite a lot like something that Apple might produce. So the phone is actually slightly thicker and slightly heavier than the original, but again, unless they're next to each other, you wouldn't be able to tell. Interestingly enough, inside the box, they decided not to include the mains adapter or the earphones, which is pretty bizarre, but I suppose at $75 it's tough to complain about that. The home button is fully functional, but it's not obviously using Apple's own Force Touch technology or any equivalent. But interestingly enough, holding it down does still bring up a voice assistant, which isn't quite Siri, but it's made to look like it. Now let's talk about the software because it's just very interesting. They've managed to make a fully functional iOS 10 skin. No, it's not as fast as the iPhone 7. No, it's not quite as functional as the iPhone 7, but it's genuinely impressive. It looks and feels literally identical. And the attention to detail here is just bizarre. They've recreated the way the apps look and feel. They've recreated the widgets and the lock screen, and even the control center swiping up from the bottom. The inbuilt apps, things like the settings, the calendar, the calculator, they all have Apple's look and feel. So to be honest, when I was using it, I couldn't help but applaud them for their effort. They've even got the parallax wallpaper effect, and amazingly, they've managed to build a mock version of the App Store that actually works. And next to that, they've got a fully functioning version of the Play Store, which you can actually download stuff from. And this is my favorite. Even though there is absolutely zero fingerprint technology on the phone, it lets you go through the whole setup process, convincing you that you've actually inputted one. The robustness of the software continues as we move over to the camera, and this was actually surprisingly one of the high points of the phone. It takes really detailed photos. With an 8-megapixel sensor, it's actually probably one of the most detailed out of any $75 phone I've tried. It captures plenty of light and produces really vibrant, sharp colors. Now notice the photos do have a slight green tinge to them, which doesn't help because I'm obviously taking photos of green things, but nonetheless I was quite impressed. It's even got enough of an aperture to get some decent bokeh going on there. Unfortunately the front camera is horrendous, but overall I'd say I was pretty impressed. Now funnily enough, it was actually a bit of a quest to try and find the actual specs of this phone, because it's programmed internally to lie to you, to tell you it has the original specs of the iPhone when actually it doesn't. So after a bit of digging, I found that the screen resolution is only 960 by 540. Having said that, given its 4.7-inch size, it actually remains quite sharp and has got a similar color representation to the original iPhone 7, so all in all, not actually a bad screen. The phone continues to impress, with actually a speaker that produces some decent volume output. In terms of how music sounds, it's better than my Galaxy S7. Not as good as the original iPhone, but it sits somewhere in between. And this is where it starts to go downhill, because the battery life is pretty measly. You can pretty much use this phone and watch the numbers dropping. It'll last one day at an absolute push if you're very careful. Internally, we've got the MT6580 and 512MB of RAM, which for the price is not actually that bad. And whilst flicking through the software on a very basic level is actually quite functional, trying to do much more than that, the phone starts to struggle. You're going to spend a lot of time on loading screens, and even trying to play the most basic 2D games is just a no-go. They'll pretty much crash instantly. Now considering these components aren't actually that underpowered, my suspicion is that the software they've made is so heavy and so CPU intensive that the phone just can't do anything else. So just this sort of final point, just to kind of really bury the phone alive, it only has 8GB of non-expandable storage and only connects to 2G networks. So there we go guys, that was the iPhone 7 clone. This was just a quick video just so you guys know what's out there, so you know what to look for and so you don't end up getting one. It looks deceivingly similar to the iPhone 7, almost to the point of being impressive, and the attention to detail is remarkable and should be applauded. Having said that, pretty much the second you try and start to do your day-to-day tasks with this, all that polish breaks down and you end up with a bit of a broken device. Thanks a lot for watching, I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.